Okay, so if you want 100% proof that Paul is a false apostle according to the book of Revelation, let's start with Revelation chapter 21, verse 14. It says, "Now the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb." So who are the 12 apostles of the Lamb? The 12 disciples of Jesus, right? Paul calls himself a self-appointed apostle. He says in Romans 1:1, Paul, a bondservant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle separated to the gospel of God. 1 Corinthians 1:1, Paul, called to be an apostle of Jesus Christ through the will of God, and Sosthenes, our brother. Galatians 1:1, Paul, an apostle, not from men, not through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead. So Paul is a self-appointed apostle according to himself. He says, Paul, an apostle, not from man, not from men, nor through man, but through Jesus Christ. So Paul is a self-appointed apostle. He wasn't handpicked by the 12. He came after, the 12 disciples. Now, some might say, well, Paul replaced Judas, because remember how Judas died before Paul became a Christian apostle or a apostle of Jesus Christ? And doesn't that mean that Paul is part of the 12 apostles of the Lamb in Revelation chapter 21, verse 14? No, it doesn't, because if we go to Acts chapter 1, verse 26, it says, what is it? It says, "Then they cast lots, and the lot fell to Matthias. So he was added to the 11 apostles." So, uh, Joseph called, so according to Acts chapter 1, verse 26, it says Matthias took the place of Judas. So there were already 12 disciples before Paul, because Matthias replaced Judas. So Paul didn't replace Judas. Matthias replaced Judas according to Acts chapter 1, verse 26. So the disciples, uh, Peter, James, etc., uh, they replaced Judas with Matthias. You see, so Acts chapter 1, verse 23 to 26 says Matthias replaced Judas. So there were already 12 disciples before Paul converted, or Paul became a Christian. So what that means is that Paul is a false apostle according to Revelation chapter 21, verse 14. We read in we read in Revelations that there were already false apostles active in, Turkey, in modern day Ephesus, which is Turkey. So what that means is that there were false apostles during the time of uh, Revelations, during the time of the disciples, and the composition of Revelations, which is the end of the first century. It says, and we read in Revelation chapter 2, verse 2, it says that there are false apostles. There are false apostles or Jesus tells the church of Ephesus, which is modern day Turkey, that he has tested individuals who claim to be apostles but are not, and has found them to be liars in Revelation chapter 2, verse 2. This passage highlights the existence of uh, false apostles that Paul also talks about in 2 Corinthians 11:13. So my point is that Revelation chapter 2, verse 2, and Revelation chapter 21, verse 14 clearly state that, or clearly imply that Paul is a false apostle amongst the apostles. So we can safely reject Paul, because Jesus warns of false apostles in Revelation chapter 2, verse 2. And we know Paul is not one of the original 12 disciples, even after Judas, because Matthias, as Acts chapter 1, verse 26 says, Matthias replaced Judas. So what that means is that Paul is a false apostle according to Revelation chapter 2, verse 2, and Revelation chapter 21, verse 14. He didn't replace he didn't replace Judas. Matthias replaced Judas. So there were already 12 disciples before Paul. So Paul is the 13th apostle and the 13th false apostle, because it says Paul, an apostle, not from men, but nor through men. So Peter didn't pick Paul, James didn't pick Paul, Thomas didn't pick Paul, etc. Paul was a self-appointed apostle, so we can safely reject Paul, because again, what Jesus says in Revelation chapter 2 verse 2 that there were individuals who claim to be apostles but are not, and he has found them to be liars. So there are false apostles and lying apostles out there, or people lying, or people pretending to be apostles who are actually lying, and Paul is definitely one of them, because he was not handpicked by the 12, rather he was a self-appointed apostle, as he says in Galatians chapter 1 verse 1. Stay tuned, more videos coming up refuting Christianity and the obvious false apostle Paul.